Hi, everybody. Thanks for.
Hello, my name is Jennifer Lopez, and I'll be your moderator today. Before we get started, there are a few things to note. On the left side of your screen, you'll see a panel with a few key tabs. Chat allows you to interact with your fellow attendees. Questions enables you to submit your questions for the speakers to answer at the end of their presentation. Size and/or other related resources can be found in the Handbook tab. If needed, resize and rearrange the panels on your screen just like they would browser windows. Click the icons on the bottom of your screen to open, close additional panels such as speaker bios, abstract, share, and often handouts. Should you have technical issues, please refresh your browser. If the issue is not resolved, please submit a note to the question tab for assistance. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for inviting us, Arizona State, and we appreciate the opportunity to share with a remote conference. One of the things we want to do before we get started is to show you the ways in which our presentation really fits into the goals of the remote summit. And so one of the things that the website for the remote summit says is that this is designed to help faculty prepare for what promises to be a messy fall semester. And we can certainly relate to that. Like most of you, we found ourselves in the middle of our last spring semester having to move our face-to-face classes into remote mode. We have are making plans now to put most of our classes in remote mode for the fall as well in the Department of Writing and Rhetoric. And so we understand the messiness that that entails. The remote website also makes note of the fact that this is really about people from across Gen Ed really speaking to discipline-specific problems. And so Guy and I are both founding members of the Department of Writing and Rhetoric, which administers our general education requirement of first-year writing. We designed the curriculum for that, and we continue to teach and amend that curriculum. So we are right in that comfort zone. The last thing that remote promises on the website is that they will talk about, the presenters will talk about ways in which you want to keep students engaged, you want to think about issues of inclusion and diversity, and you want to talk about tools that can really cut across mixed modes or mixed methods of delivery. And the materials that we're going to talk about today were designed specifically to address rhetorical content knowledge gaps and preparation gaps for incoming freshmen. And so they're right in the heart of the things we think about when we think about inclusion and diversion or diversity for first-year students. They were also designed to be used in an electronic platform, and they were designed to be engaging in an electronic platform. And so even though we use these tools across all of our methods of delivery, face-to-face, online, hybrid, and now in the remote world, they're designed to be engaging across all of those platforms or all of those modes of delivery. So we feel like this really fits right in with the goals of remote. And what Guy's going to do next is show you what our first semester course looks like.
Hi, everyone. So the slide you're seeing right now shows a look at our curriculum, which I think is going to match up or align pretty well with a lot of state universities, public universities. A little explanation on a couple of those terms. Common Reading Text Project just deals with the common read we have annually every year on our campus, which is a pretty ubiquitous thing in institutions across America. So students do a little engagement with that book. And commonplace book is our term for reflection. Some of our teachers use different terms, but our students do reflection throughout the semester, and that's compiled in what we refer to as a commonplace book or reflective blog. The rest of that's going to look pretty familiar to everybody: analysis, argument, multimodal. A little bit later, I'll show you how the modules that we use align with these genres more specifically. But building on what Karen said, I want to talk briefly about the mode of delivery. So I teach both face-to-face and online, and have used the modules in both settings. And one of the things that I love about these modules is that it doesn't really lose much impact, or the engagement is still there when we go to an online format. And so these students complete these modules essentially as homework assignments. So even if I'm in a face-to-face class, the students are working with these outside of the class mostly. We may talk about that in the class, but we can do that just as well online also. So the mode of delivery is not really impacted by with the work that we're doing here. And I think that that's important as so many people have switched from face-to-face to online classes. So Karen's going to talk a little bit about those preparation gaps that she mentioned earlier on this next part.
Yeah, so just to give you some history of how these materials were developed, about 3 or 4 years ago, we were trying to address in our first year writing program a problem that's pretty common to most universities, which is college preparation gaps, and particularly rhetorical knowledge gaps of our incoming freshmen. So at the University of Mississippi, we have some students who come in with great rhetorical preparation. They've had lots of writing in high school. They have a good understanding of rhetorical strategies. And we also have lots of students who have no understanding of rhetorical strategies, may not even understand how to pronounce the word rhetoric, and didn't have to do a lot of writing in high school. And then we have students at every level in between. And so we had been looking for a way to address those preparation gaps without creating an additional burden on our instructors, because our instructors are already teaching full power. At the time, our university was working with the APLU on a grant that was funded from the Gates Foundation to try to use some adaptive learning tools in particularly gen ed courses. And we thought that that might be an opportunity for us to find a tool to help address those readiness preparation gaps. So that's where our search began. We ran into some barriers along the way. We were very drawn to open educational resources. We had a history of working with open educational resources, but at the time that we were looking, there was a lot of inconsistency and uneven relevance for our program in terms of the materials that were available. When we went to proprietary materials by the textbook publishers, they were complex, huge. The cost was pretty high for students, and there was really not a lot of ability to make them flexible to work with our curriculum. And then the other thing that we kept in mind in that search was that we wanted our faculty to own these tools, this tool that we wanted to use. We wanted them to feel like they could make it work in their individual classes. We wanted them to maintain agency with it. So eventually, we found a solution, and that solution was to design an OER-based adaptive courseware tool. And Lumen Learning was our partner in this. And it's focused primarily on the core rhetorical knowledge and skills that we want our students to develop throughout their first semester course. Some students we knew would come in with a good base of this knowledge, and other students we knew would come in with none of this knowledge. So we looked for some research that would really help us see if a tool like that could maybe fill that gap. And we found a couple of good studies that suggested there was that possibility. And so we decided to go for it, and with Lumen Learning's help, design some adaptive courseware for ourselves. And so what Guy's going to do next is to show you how that courseware works in terms of our courses.
Yes, so apologies if this is a little small. I'm going to read over these quickly. So our current iteration of the modules in our courses features 11 different modules that students work on. Those, I'll read over that list quickly. Reflection, rhetorical reading, beyond the 5-paragraph essay, revision, analysis, rhetorical appeals, argument, evaluating sources, using sources, multimodality, and readability. And that readability would be our version of some grammar work, some areas that our teachers have pointed out as lacking, or things that they want to not spend a lot of class time on. Those align, so the arrows there align with our major projects. As I told you earlier, reflection is kind of our superstructure. So students start with a module on reflection, learn a lot about what good reflection looks like and what the expectations are in the classes. And then the rest of those modules align directly with the major projects that students are working on. So these are good for two reasons. I'm going to give you a point from faculty perspective and a point from student perspective. From the student perspective, these modules that they're working on tie directly with the major assignments that they're doing. So they don't see this as detached homework or, kind of workbook activities. They see this as building in directly to what they're working on that they're going to get a major score on. Of course, the modules count for grade 2. Our homework grades usually are about 15% in our classes, but students see that grade and a bigger grade that they're working for. From a faculty perspective, this is nice because although we've aligned these modules with certain projects, they are movable. These are certainly not immutable, and so teachers have the ability to move things around. And if a teacher, for instance, is really big on introducing students to using sources in a class, they can start with that module if they want to. They can get right into that, and that can be the foundational kind of piece that students need up front. So the flexibility is there for teachers. The autonomy is there for teachers, but then the relevance is really there for students. I think what we'll move into now is taking a look at the insides of these modules a little bit, and I'll try to do a couple of screen shares with you so you can see what's going on. In fact, I'm going to show you a little bit of what's going on right now in my summer class. So I'm going to jump ahead and show you a little bit of what things look like in the classes. So we use Blackboard on our campus, and I know some of you probably use Blackboard, some of you use other LMS, Canvas. No real difference. The modules are embedded in our Blackboard page, which we really enjoy and our students enjoy because to many of our students, they just see that they're logging onto Blackboard and doing the work for their course. So this doesn't mean they have to go somewhere else or think about somewhere else. They just go into the spaces that they're used to. All of the modules have a study plan and a quiz. The assessment part is where our students are graded, but we give our students 2 attempts at those quizzes. And we let them spend plenty of time in that study plan preparing for those quizzes. So you can see there, students go work through that study plan. The modules themselves, pull up an example of what something's going to look like inside a module. Modules themselves are going to contain short bits of text, so kind of short bursts of text where students do some reading, and then a lot of interactive activities. Karen and I and those who have had a role in design have looked at the research. We know where students get tripped up with reading. We know that students stop reading if they have to scroll down a lot, or if they just encounter huge chunks of text where they don't see any breakups. So we've tried to make this very reader-friendly and user-friendly with a lot of interactive practices where students can stop, think about what they've read, and try to apply it in some sort of low stakes or really no stakes, just practice environment before they go in and take an assessed quiz. And as I mentioned earlier, they can go back in and take a second attempt at that quiz if they didn't score well, and that includes time to go back into the modules themselves. So let me show you one more thing in here. This is an example of a page with a practice exercise, and this is just on commas. So I spoke a little earlier about readability and some of the common errors that our teachers pointed out. All of the material in here was recommended by our teachers, so it wasn't a kind of catch-all or kitchen sink work on grammar. As Karen mentioned, some of the textbook options are like that. We got direct feedback from our teachers on what they wanted their students to work on and what could be most advantageous to them. On the faculty side, speaking to that, I'm going to try to take you in and do a little screen share here to show you what some of the advantages from faculty are. So what you're looking at here is inside my summer course. And there's a couple of things for faculty here that are really helpful. So one is, you'll notice there it says help students who are trying but struggling, and I get daily updates on the students who are taking quizzes and not performing at a certain threshold. I set mine at 80%, though teachers are willing to or able to set that at whatever they want. I figure 80 is they score an 80, they're doing okay. So if I get students scoring below that, I get a notification. Also, you see there's an auto messages quick setup. What that does is allow me to send automated messages, though I can customize those beforehand, to students that let them know if they score over that threshold that I've set, that they've done a good job, and I'm proud of what they're doing, and I'm looking at their work. And if they score under that, I remind them that they can take a second quiz attempt, and to make sure that they take their time and go back in and spend the necessary time so that they think they'll score better on that next quiz attempt. Last one I want to show you here, excuse me, inside the work is some application. So what I've got up here is a screenshot from one of our modules working on an analytic thesis statement. And this module really helps students get into the why, how, and so what that an analytic thesis statement should contain. And what you'll see there, and I'm sorry if it's a little small, I'll read a little bit to you. What you see is a little bit of reading on how students can help apply that why, how, and so what. And then off to the left, I've included an example of a student thesis, and I'm going to read that to you quickly. The thesis or the introductory paragraph material here that I'm going to read from the student says, in the New York Times article, gunfire erupts at a school, leaders offer prayers, children are buried, repeat. The visual aspect plays a primary role. The first image included is highly emotionally charged and uses many photographic and thematic decisions to further sway the reader. Taken from a higher angle to show the mass of mourners with the sun setting behind them, this image portrays the idea that in the midst of a true tragedy, there is hope and unity. This is an assignment here where students are asked to analyze an image in a newspaper article and understand how rhetorical appeals and how things work to impact viewers or even manipulate viewers at times. And I read this thesis here to you today because this is a student, this is not me cherry picking the best work from my students. This is me taking a student who was really struggling with what the idea of analysis is and rhetorical analysis. And yet after a lot of work in the module and after a conference with me, this is what the student came up with on the thesis. And I'm really proud of it. I think it's really strong work. And so that's kind of a quick view of inside some of the modules. And we're happy to talk about that a little more and answer questions later. I'm going to turn it back over to Karen so she can tell you a little bit about feedback that we've gotten from faculty and students.
And so one of the things we want to make sure that we do, and I'm sure you do this in your department as well, is we want to make sure that the materials that we're using are working for our students and they're working for our faculty. And so on this slide, under the student words, you'll see some quotes from students who came to college well prepared in terms of rhetorical knowledge, and some students who felt very underprepared. And you'll see in the first two couple of quotes, the students there really say, hey, I use this to review. It really helped deepen my understanding of something that I had a cursory understanding of. And then in the third quote there, you'll see a student who had really never heard, he's speaking specifically about how to use sources in writing and who hadn't done a lot of writing in high school. You can see how he uses the modules a little bit differently. He works through them several times, and he's teaching himself the material, and he's constantly assessing himself, and he feels that he gets to a point where he really understands what he needs to do. And the last quote on there is kind of universal across students, just doesn't matter what level of preparation they're at. And that is that they like that they're able to apply the material in the modules as they're working on their projects. And I think particularly in a remote setting where you might not be meeting with your students synchronously very often, having something for students to be able to use that would take the place of classroom discussion or questions other students might ask in class has the potential to be really important. We also showed you some of our faculty response to it. The things that they tend to note are that because students are working in the modules independently, it saves them time to focus on higher order skills. They also talk about the fact that they often use the modules when they're working with students in conference, sort of pointing them to specific material that will help them if they go back in and work on it. And then they also talk about the way that the modules work very seamlessly with Blackboard. And because we are so interested in our faculty maintaining agency with all the materials that they use, we have an annual continuous improvement workshop. We borrowed this language and idea from Lumen. And what happens is that Lumen helps us understand from the quiz data where some students are not, or a majority of students actually, are not meeting the goals that we would like them to meet. We gather select members of our faculty together. We take a look at the results. We take a look at the material, and we update the material, or we update the questions and the quizzes in order to continually make the materials better. Sometimes we find gaps of material that we know we need to add as well. And that's proven to be a really wonderful way of keeping faculty engaged and making sure that they have taken ownership of the modules. So what Guy's going to do next is talk a little bit about how you might be able to take these materials and put them into practice in your own programs.
One quick follow-up on that continuous improvement workshop is we've held our workshop so far in person, but in the age of COVID, there is really nothing stopping us from doing that work virtually or remotely. And so we don't have any plans to put a stop to that. Even if we're working at a distance for the next several months, we should be able to do some assessment. So I'm going to end with this last slide, and then we can have some Q&A time. The main bullet points here are, these are what we call actionable insights, and we've got addressing preparation gaps as a natural fit for adaptive courseware. And so that's really important in this big move from a lot of face-to-face sections to online sections too, is that we still see this as a great way to address preparation gaps and fill in some of the ways that we can, we interact with our students face to face, and we catch on to things and we get to know them better. And so we have a sense of where students are performing. That might not happen as easily in remote environments, but we think that these modules give teachers data points and give teachers ways to still kind of determine some of those things. The ability to work independently in the modules is a natural fit for an online environment. Obviously, I think that speaks for itself. So as I mentioned earlier, these are homework in my face-to-face classes. So that really doesn't change just given the fact that we're online. Also, adaptive courseware provides an additional evaluative tool for the writing classroom, which is, so we know how much is underassessed or unassessed in writing classrooms. And so this lets us get to know our students better, what they're bringing to the table, what we can talk to them about in conferencing and on feedback on their papers. And finally, the last thing we'll leave you with, and like I said, Karen and I are happy to talk about this more or answer questions both in this session and later. Our contact information is on the first slide, so feel free to get a hold of us. The modules, all the content is open. It's either open OER or stuff we've developed in-house and made open. So all of that content is available at no charge at the Lumen Learning website there. The quizzes are what our students pay for. Those are behind a firewall, but the content itself is open and available, and we encourage people to take a look at what we're doing. It's been a big success for our students and faculty, and we're excited about what we're doing. So thanks, everybody, for your time, and we'd love to answer questions and talk to you a little more about this.
Audience, so let's get started with the Q&A now. Just as a quick reminder, Q&A, just click on the question tab on the left side of your screen and type your questions into the text box located in the bottom of the parallel, or click the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen to reopen the panel. So let's start with the first question for you guys. So what is the purpose of quizzes in a writing class? What do they accomplish, and what goals do they help students accomplish? Are you quizzes in large percentage of a student grade?
Sure, I'll start off.
I'll start, Guy, and then you.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say it's a natural question for a writing class because we do have such supremacy on the written product, and we still keep that in our classes. So teachers are able to decide what percentage they want the quizzes to be. We like them to be enough to make sure that the students find them worth doing, but not so much that they in any way overwhelm the grade on their writing. So maybe 15% for some faculty members is kind of where they land. I will say this was the hardest sell for our writing teachers because, of course, we privilege the written product. But one of the things we did find was that the quizzes give us a way to see what their understanding of rhetoric is before they're able to apply it to their projects. And that was new for us. We hadn't been able to see that before. We just had to take a guess from the written product. So in that way, we feel like we have more understanding of what's going on in our students' heads as they're working. And Guy, you jump in.
I think that's perfect. You captured my sentiments exactly. I mean, the only thing I would add is that now when I conference with students, Karen alluded to this, when I conference with students, I kind of have a starting point for what I feel they know or what their rhetorical content knowledge is instead of, as Karen said, assuming these things.
Okay, on to the next question. So it says, in your handout, you say the modules are available at no charge, but Lumen has a price scheduled $25. What exactly is free?
So the content?
Yeah, and so, go ahead, Guy.
So the content is free and open. What's charged? What the charges for is for our students to take quizzes and assessments, and those are graded assessments. And kind of an answer to this and the previous question too is a lot of our students actually like this. The kind of quiz aspect, the things they can spend a lot of time with and go back and look at the material and take a second quiz attempt. We probably all had students before you've heard say, well, I don't like writing, or I'm not a good writer. This allows them to kind of think about that in deeper ways. So they're fine with that. And then, to this particular question, those quizzes are what those students are paying for. And if you look at the amount of the grade, so like Karen mentioned earlier, our students are about 15% of their grade is homework grade. That cost is pretty minimal. I've never really had many students think that was an exorbitant cost or a problem for them financially. This is in place of a book we used to have that was $75, $80. So,
right. If you use the link at the end that's on the last slide, you can access all the materials there just as OER materials. They won't include the quizzes, but they include everything else. So you can easily use them that way.
One last question for you. So are the modules used as an online component of a tradition face-to-face course?
So I'll start with that. Yes, we use them across modalities. So they're used in our web classes, which are classes that are offered online every semester. We use them in our face-to-face classes. And of course, they translated to our remote classes when we went remote last spring.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would add I would add quickly there that one of the advantages, which we kind of mentioned in our presentation, is that this particular aspect of the class works well in a face-to-face course and in an online or remote setting. I don't think the students really notice much of a difference because they do the work out of class. So that's an advantage.
Okay, so do the modules import to both Canvas as well as Blackboard?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, so Lumen has set things up so that whatever course management, learning management system you're using, at least the stuff that I've heard of, the big ones like Canvas and Blackboard, there aren't any problems there. It's seamless.
Okay, So unfortunately, we are about out of time today. Once again, I would like to thank both Guy and Karen for joining us today and providing their firsthand experience. Please be sure to explore the event to access more valuable resources from our sponsors, network, and peers. Thank you, everyone, and you have a good day. Any last words from you guys?
Thank you
Thanks,
for attending.
everybody.